was younger, I loved visiting the library and taking out as many books as I possibly could. I loved reading lots of different kinds of books. Comic books, made-up story books, rhyming books, information books, books about the lives of real people, books set in other times or places. These books were really special to me. They helped me to discover new things that I didn't know before. I learned new skills, they made me laugh, and they grew my imagination. As I grew up, I discovered that there was a book even more special than all of the books that I'd read from the library. And this book was the Bible.
To us, the Bible is one book, but did you know it's actually made up of lots of books? 66 books, in fact. It's divided into two parts: the Old Testament writings, which point forward to Jesus, God's Son, coming to earth, and the New Testament writings about the time of Jesus' birth and onwards until Jesus returns to earth. The Bible is all about Jesus.
Do you know or have you heard of any Bible stories before? Maybe you've heard about the story of God making the world and everything in it, including people like you and me. Or the story of a man called Moses who God spoke to from a burning bush. Or the story of Joshua who brought down the walls of a city by walking around and blowing a trumpet. Or the story of David, a shepherd boy who killed a giant with a sling and some stones. Or the story of Peter, who ended up walking on water. Can you guess how many stories are in the Bible? Well, I'll tell you, there is just one story, one big story. The story that runs through the Bible is the story of God's rescue plan for the world. In the Old Testament, a rescuer is promised, and God's people look forward to his coming. In the New Testament, the rescuer comes, and God's people are sent to tell everyone the good news of what he has done. So even though there are lots of different books with many different stories that make up the Bible, it was written by many different people, it all connects together. Every book that makes up the Bible connects together and tells us three important things. Firstly, the Bible tells us about God the Father. People can have lots of different ideas about who God is and what he's like. Some people today imagine that God is a bit like Santa. And I suppose, in a way, he is, because just like Santa, God gives us lots of good things. But I think God would be disappointed if we only ever think about him once a year or when we want something. There's more to God than that. Some people can think that God is like the police, because it's his job to see that people keep his rules. But I think God might be disappointed if we believe he's only interested in catching and punishing us when we do wrong. There's more to God than that. But what does the Bible say God is like? The Bible's favourite word to describe God is Father. He is the best dad you can ever imagine. Maybe some of you don't have a dad, or your dad's no longer with you, or some of us might not know who our real dad is, but all of us can imagine the best dad ever. The Bible tells us what God is like, someone who understands us and loves and cares deeply about us, someone who's ready to listen and help us, someone who always works for our good and teaches us the best way to live, someone who's ready to forgive us when we say sorry and mean it. And we don't have to wonder or try to guess what God is like. The Bible tells us exactly what he's like, and the Bible says he is the best dad you can imagine. And he's given us the Bible because he wants us to get to know him and he wants to speak to us.
Secondly, the Bible tells us about Jesus the King. Way back at the beginning of the world, when God created Adam and Eve, which we read about in Genesis, the first book of the Bible, God promised that he would send his son Jesus. God needed to send Jesus because Adam and Eve had messed up by choosing their own way instead of God's way, something the Bible calls sin. And so sin was in the world, but Jesus came to put that right so that we can have a friendship with God. Jesus came into the world to be a king so special, a king of kings, So let's hear from your officers a Bible story that tells us about Jesus being king. Listen carefully, because we'll have some questions too. In the story you've just heard, Jesus was the king. The people who came to watch wanted Jesus to be their king, but the people wanted Jesus to be king in a certain way. Perhaps when you hear the word king, you think of robe, crown, throne, queen, power, or castle. The people wanted Jesus to be king in this way. They wanted him to rule the land, sit on the throne, and change lots of things that happened that they didn't like, to make their lives easier. But Jesus had a different idea about what it meant to be king. He didn't plan to sit on a throne on earth and rule as the other kings at that time did. He wanted to be the king of their lives. He wanted them to give their lives to him and follow him, because when he dies on the cross, he would give up his life for them.
The Bible tells us how to live God's way.
So Sarah and I are going to play a game of Rachel Says, and we want you to join in with us. Maybe you've played Simon Says before, and it's very similar. Every time I say Rachel Says, I want you to do whatever the action is. But if I don't say Rachel Says, then I don't want you to do it. So we'll see how you and Sarah get on. All right? Are you ready? Let's go. So Rachel says, touch your head. Rachel says, touch your toes. Rachel says, turn around on the spot. Rachel says, do some star jumps. Jump up and down. Ah, Sarah! I hope you were better than Sarah. But I wonder, what instructions do you follow at BB? What instructions do you follow in the games that you play or the activities that you do? Imagine what a mess it would be if someone decided to no longer go up the ladders or made up their number of moves whenever they rolled the dice. How would you know who was the winner? So why are instructions important? Well, I think following instructions are important because they can keep you and others safe from harm. And they make sure games are fair and that you enjoy what you are doing in the best way. Did you know that God has given us important instructions in the Bible, and he wants us to follow them? He gave us instructions so that we would know the best way to live, to protect us, and so we can enjoy living in the world that he created.
When we love someone, whether it's a person in our family or one of our friends, we can tell them that we love them or show them that we love them by maybe giving them a hug. We might spend some time with them, share what you have with them, or mean it when we say sorry if we let them down or hurt them. One of the ways we can show God we love him is by spending time with him through reading the Bible and then doing what he says in our everyday lives.
The Bible really is a very special book. It's God's one big story telling us all about who he is and how he wants us to live. I hope that you join in the adventure, listening to or reading the Bible, and through it, getting to know God more.